and welcome to Lead a Horse to Water, the equine training and behaviour podcast. And I'm your host, Trudy Dempsey. Now, today I'm delighted to be joined by Nicky Ross. Nicky is an equine behaviourist with over 20 years of experience. She specialises in exploring and nurturing the horse-human relationship, and she teaches equine behaviour both online and at home in the beautiful Scottish Highlands, where she lives alongside her herd of Shetland ponies. Her recent case study, published with CABI, explores how developing agency and giving horses the ability to make meaningful choices can enhance the bond between horses and humans. Through her pony adventure walks, Nicky invites her ponies to choose whether to take part, which route to follow, and even which person they'd like to accompany. Nicky's work challenges us to reimagine what partnership with horses can look like when we truly listen to their voices. I'm so excited to dive into this conversation. Hi, Nicky. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for inviting me.
So I want to dig in to Nicky when you were younger, when you were maybe a child, and tell us about how you fell in love with ponies, horses. We'll get into the other stuff, the current stuff later, but give us your backstory. People really love to hear all that.
Okay, so I was kind of a typical pony kid, so I started riding lessons when I was 5. And then next door to the riding school, there was an animal sanctuary, a rescue centre. So when I was 12, I went round there and I started helping out there. And it was a very different environment from the riding school because you've got lots of different species, and it's not a business as such. It was a charity, so it had a different feel to it. And because I was 12 and I had no other responsibilities, it meant that when we did all the mucking out and all the jobs in the morning, after that, we were free then to do whatever we wanted. And I kind of found myself drawn towards the ponies, especially the Shetlands, that were particularly anxious. So the ones who had either had a lot of abuse or completely unhandled. And they were the ones that I started to gravitate towards. And Pat Hartley, who was the owner of the sanctuary at the time, used to go up to the Shetland house, and it's when they had the meat markets for the Shetland foals, and she'd fill horse boxes full of Shetland foals, drive them all the way back down. So they'd all turn up scruffy with big stickers on their bums and paint on their manes, and they'd just go into this big barn together, and they'd be huddled at the back of the barn in the corner. And so I'd just go and sit and have my lunch on the other side of the wooden partition with them. And I just found over a number of days, number of weeks, doing this with different horses, gradually I started to notice changes in their behaviour, changes in the way they'd respond and how I'd respond. And all I did was go and eat my lunch in there. I didn't do anything else. I just was conscious that if I lifted my energy, if I moved in a certain way, they'd move away, so I dropped it and I'd turn away. So I was learning everything from them. And then it got to a point where we had a little pony come in, and she'd been turned out in the paddock. And she had to come in for medical care, but no one could get anywhere near her. And I'd been doing this, sit and have my lunch with her for a number of days. And one of the owners of the sanctuary said, are you able to go and catch her? I thought, well, I've never tried to do anything with her. But we had got to the point where I'd sit and eat my lunch, and she'd come and rest her nose on my head while I was eating lunch, and then we'd part to go away. So I went in with a head collar on rope, which I'd never done before, and I said, would you like to come? And she just stood there. I put the head collar on, put the rope on, and we walked out together. And she had been completely unhandled, had been very difficult to get there in the first place. So that kind of really ignited this interest in what happens when you don't do anything, when you don't train, but when you listen and you respond in a way that makes them feel comfortable. So that was what I wanted to pursue, and I wanted to find out more about that. But this was 30 odd years ago. So being able to access that information about equine behaviour and equine communication, that wasn't really a thing. It wasn't really available. So I started to go around different places to try and find out more. So I worked in eventing yards, I worked in racing yards, I worked in natural horsemanship centres, and I just couldn't find the information I was looking for. It just nobody knew. Everyone was saying the same thing. You know, they kind of dressed it up in a different way, but basically everyone was saying you need to show them as boss, you need to lunge them, you need to do this, and none of it really made much sense. And you kind of say, okay, I see that works, therefore that's what we should do. But it didn't really trigger. And then eventually I found the Natural Animal Centre, as was then. So back then it was set up by Heather Simpson originally, and actually I don't know if you were there at the same time or you had links at the same time, but we so then there wasn't online learning, so you went to the centre a couple of times a year and you did a full intensive training on equine behaviour, and that was when the doors kind of opened. I thought, okay, this is what I've been looking for, because we're learning about ethology, we're learning about communication, we're learning about physiology, all the things that is just wasn't there in the horse world. And at the time I was, I say working with, but I just kind of imposed myself upon this like petting zoo, I guess, in Cumbria. And they had a really interesting little foal. Well, she was 5 now, but she'd been born there, and she was they bought a Shetland pony who was in foal, which I didn't realise. And when the Shetland pony gave birth, the Shetland was half zebra. So this was a half zebra, half Shetland pony, and they tried to manhandle her. Zebras don't respond in the same way that horses do. They're a different ball game, and they do fight to the death. So, and they'd had like wrestled her to the ground, all sorts of things. She'd broken people's arms, and by the time I got there, she had a head collar on that they'd put on when she was younger, and as she'd grown, it had cut into her face because they couldn't get near to get it off. So I asked if I would be allowed to just go and see if I can get to a point where I can take the head collar off, because no one was going to be leading her anyway. You know, they took her mum, and she was still with her mum. Excuse me. Meeting her coincided with me starting at the Natural Animal Centre. So it very quickly became clear that I could not work with this little Posy, her name was, couldn't work with her in any other way other than on her terms and using positive reinforcement. So that introduced me to positive reinforcement. Although I had to be very careful with that as well, because she was very near threshold all the time, and she could go over threshold very easily, and because she'd never had other food and couldn't do scratches, and that was an interesting thing to get around. She also introduced me to the concept of the gap of silence. If you stand there and do nothing, she will explode. So I couldn't do nothing either. So she was quite an interesting little horse to play with and get to know. And she taught me a huge lot. One about zebra, because I'd never had the opportunity. Oh, excuse me. But also about what happens when you take all the gadgets away. And someone had tried round pen training with her and found that actually she just tried to kill you. So working with her in a way that was purely listening and her feeling listened to, and also adapting her environment to make sure that her needs were met, that was the key for her. Her story doesn't end, well, it does end happily, but my bit with her doesn't end very happily, because the owners of the petting zoo were very money driven. They decided they were going to split Posy and her mum up, put her on her own next door to 2 other zebra, because obviously she's a zebra and therefore she will know zebra, but obviously she'd never met a zebra before in her life. In an environment where there was nothing, it was a plain field, very small field, metal fencing, double metal fencing. She was classed as a wild animal, so couldn't touch anybody else, and nothing else. So it was a very impoverished environment. There was a shelter, but no enrichment, no other companionship. So when I turned up to do training, I was the only enrichment in her life. So I'd start to make kind of vegetable kebabs, so like a carrot, a swede, all threaded on a string, and tie them up to leave her with to go. But it got to the point where she'd seen me go to the bag to get it out, and she'd attack me because she knew that was the prerequisite for me going. And I spoke to her and I said, look, it's not safe now because of the management change. If we can do this and this in the management, it'll be fine. But they were not open to changing anything. So I had to stop working with her. And that was a bit heartbreaking because it was no longer beneficial to her, it was no longer beneficial to me. But without them putting those changes in place, it was a bit of a stalemate. But I did, I moved away from Cumbria and I actually moved down to work at the Natural Animal Centre. And then a few years later, I tried to find out about posing again. Now, having done another couple of years of animal behaviour, I thought, okay, another level, I'm going to try this. And the petting zoo had closed down. And I tried to look for posy. And I went online and loads of people were looking for her. Loads of people. Her name kept coming up and people asking this little Zeboid, where has she gone? No one knew. And then 4 years ago, we were driving on the Isle of Arran, looking at property when we were going to move up to the Highlands. And we drove past a field and there was this little stripy pony in the field. So we stopped and there was a house opposite the field. So I went in there and asked them about it. I said, oh no, it's not, she's called Zara. Zara the Zorse, they called her. But she molted in a very funny way. She molted in patches rather than, and she was in halfway through this molt. I thought it's got to be, I mean, how many stripy ponies are there in the world? Yeah. So I kind of dug a little deeper, and it was a rescue centre. So this lady had got her from some cowboys, she described them as cowboys, who had bought her, and they basically contacted the rescue centre, can you please come and take this pony because we can't do anything with her, she's really dangerous. She discovered that they'd got her into the lorry using electrified electric tape, and she'd really been through a horrible time. And I went and stood at the gate at the field and I called her and she looked at me and I clicked the clicker and she came over to the fence. And Diane, who owns the restaurant, I've never seen her approach anyone over the fence. I said, it's because it's Posy.
Yeah. I know who it is, yeah.
I know her, yeah. And so then I could do a little bit of work with the owner and said, this is what she learned. This is how we can get her back down to calm. And her aggression had gone through the roof by this point because she'd been so badly handled between me knowing her. And I mean, by this time she's 24. So this was 20 years on.
Wow.
And Diane had found that if she lived with a little Shetland, then she was happy. And so I had newspaper clippings of when I trained Posy and photos and things, so I could show her those. And the Shetland she had her with was exactly the same as her mum, a little chestnut Shetland. So she'd created this relationship, and she's still there. She's still happy in there. And they changed her name back to Posy as well because her name was
sweet.
A big thing. So it's nice that she's got
nice ending, but a tricky part way through it. So I'm starting to see, Nicky, how you have kind of all these experiences have pushed you. And I think you were mentioning there that you were up in the Highlands looking at properties. Well, I know where you are now and what's happening. So how did all that link up, and where do we find Nicky now?
So when I qualified as a behaviourist, I did the kind of route that I was trained to do, which was doing behavioural consultations and creating behaviour modification programs for owners. And I did it for a few years, and then I started to get a little bit disheartened with it, as you do, because you kind of see...
As you do.
And you can't shift the thinking, and therefore the horse keeps suffering, and it becomes quite difficult. So I started... We were living in Sheffield at the time, and I started a kids' horse behaviour group. So they'd come, I'd have two different groups, they'd come twice a week, each group would come once a week, and we learned different behavioural concepts. And then we'd have a little bit of play with the ponies, applying these behaviour concepts, did a little bit of positive reinforcement training, all kinds of different things, took them out for little wanders. And then we did that for a few years, and then when I moved up here, I wanted to... It was just after COVID, and we were all in need of a lot of space, which is why we chose the most remote part of Scotland. But I also want to give the Shetlands, the little herd I've got, a more wild life, a more choice in their life, rather than just a field. And here is where they thrive, and this is the best environment for them. So that was a big part of the move here as well.
Yeah.
But I couldn't run. We're really remote. There are very few people here. So I couldn't run the horse behaviour classes anymore.
Yeah.
Because we did a couple, but there's so few children and so many other things to do. So I kind of diversified in two different things. So I started an online learning hub, which is kind of an equine behaviour course and a hub. So that's all online, so we can teach behaviour online. And I also started doing pony adventure walks for tourists. So this wasn't marketed at horse people, it was marketed at tourists. And it was my way of sneakily teaching behaviour to people who wouldn't otherwise get the opportunity, I think. So that, and it also means that I can do it in a way that's very horse-led. The ponies opt in or opt out, and if I feel like they need some time away, then I'll just block sessions where people can't come, they can't, and it's very horse-led that way. So that's kind of where it evolved to.
Fantastic.
And I also run kind of groups for owners up in Fort William and things as well.
Yeah. Amazing. I mean, I always love those personal journeys because it's chance meetings. It's being brave enough to knock on the door of a petting zoo and, I'm coming to do stuff here. It's all those things that make us who we are. We can take all the courses in the world, but actually it's those little moments when we really interact with horses, ponies, Zorses. I mean, that there's like so many different things we could do, and people are very stuck on kind of, I have to work with horses if I'm going to do horses, but actually, there's so much to be learned across species. If we understand the ethology of the anything that we're working with in terms of horse, dog, cat, whatever, the same sort of principles apply. We just need to know a bit about their ethology. I thought it was interesting, first of all, that you said, like the behaviour consulting, it's hard work, isn't it? It is a real drain. Yeah. I always think it's like being an actress on the stage for 2 or 3 hours. You go and see a client that you don't know, because it's not like a training client where you might have built up a relationship. It's normally somebody you've never met. You don't know where they are on their understanding, and they expect you to fix the problem. So it's all eyes on you, and probably if you're at a yard, it's all the yard's eyes on you as well. And I think it's a really, really tough ask. We need more people doing it. We need it to be a more accepted part of the industry. I think now people are just not aware they're going to behave what we might refer to as behaviour trainers, which is a whole different thing, isn't it? The actual behaviour consultant role, I think, is a really important one that we seem to get a lot of fallout on that. And listen, everybody, get into it. Even as a little aside to other things that you're doing, I'm not saying that necessarily it's something to do on its own, because it is tough. I think it's a hard one. I think it's so interesting as well that you worked with charities and then you've ended up working in business. The whole thing, there's so much to learn, isn't there? When you work for yourself, there's all this to kind of grapple with. And I think, you've done an incredible job, because I see you're on Facebook and social media, and you're obviously well respected in what you do. Now, tell us the name of your business, and then I want you to talk a little bit about agency, how you introduced it, especially with the Shetlands. You said there you block out time when they're not expected to do anything if you feel they're not quite there. Tell us maybe even a bit about their environment. I know you said they have a lot of space, but I think particularly agency right now, along with social license to operate, is they're quite buzzwords, and I think sometimes people aren't really sure how they can even, perhaps we could even apply it to people who aren't in a Nicky situation, who don't live where you do and don't have all those resources. We can perhaps even think about some things that other people might adopt. But tell us about your ponies, your business, and how you have adopted the agency for them.
So the business is Horseplay at Highlands. So it was really horseplay when we were in Sheffield, and then I shoved the Highlands bit on the end as we came up here. The agency component underlies everything. So it really kind of hit the headlines, if you like, when we went from the 5 freedoms to the 5 domains, because they added in the agency domain, practically. And it was that recognition that without agency, we're not meeting a positive welfare state. We're going from a negative welfare state to neutral, but we're not going to positive. And that's where agency comes in. That's why it's so important. So agency, I mean, an animal has choice, control and challenge within their environment away from the time with humans as well as the time with humans. So both sides. So what I did when I set up initially it was a course, I wrote an online course, and it covered all those key concepts that we teach whenever we go on a behaviour consultation. I don't know if you're the same, we always come up with the same things. We talk about ethology, we talk about the physiology of stress, there are key things that always come up. And when you've got that information and you understand it and you can apply it to your horse, you solve your behaviour problems, because you're seeing it from an equine perspective rather than from a training perspective as much. And the training bit then comes in later on when you've established the baseline. The horse has got to a point where it can learn well. So the Learning Hub addresses that beginning bit. It doesn't go into training, it goes into this is how you understand your horse. And there's a little, so you kind of do a video lesson, and then there's a booklet with observation exercises. You've got to observe your horse, you observe the lesson that you just listened to, and you make notes, and then you reflect on what you've seen, and then you put into practice anything you need to change or anything you've noticed, and that's the applied bit of it. And then we meet up once a month and have a live study group, and that's either straight Q&A, if lots of people have messaged me through the month saying, I'm stuck on this, right, let's just talk through things. Or I bring in other people who are specialists in their subject that might go above the information that's in the hub, or we analyse maybe some training, or we analyse new research. So it's that constantly building and staying on top of the most recent developments in equine behaviour. So the agency side of things, I was contacted by Emily Keeson about CABI were looking for people to put in case studies of something that interesting they were doing from a welfare perspective. And I'd been playing around with the agencies thing with the Shetlands up here because suddenly I could. And I discovered lots of really interesting concepts, and you know, it'd gone quite a long way. And I was aware that this isn't something that everyone's got access to. So creating a case study and putting it out and saying, this is what has worked and this is how we can put this into other contexts, that would be quite helpful. That's where the case study came from.
What do you think? Just back a moment, because you mentioned some really interesting things. You know, choice, control and challenge. We love those. The thing that always, everyone knows, I think they know what choice is, but let's go through those three just briefly. So when we say we're offering choice, and if you're on a livery yard and it feels like you have no choice, you know, Nicky can have choice because you can leave a pony in the field that day and not take it out with your clients. You know, there is still stuff we can give horses choice with, isn't there, even if we're at a livery yard? And I think people miss that.
Yeah, and I think when we say choice, we mean the option between two or more things. So at a really basic level, can your horse eat in multiple different places, or do they always have to eat at one place? And I think we do have to shift our the bar of what's okay in terms of keeping horses. It's not okay to lock a horse in the stable for 12 hours a day, 24 hours a day. We've got to move away from that. That's got to change. So I think there are lots of things that you can do around enrichment to give horses choice to different things, but the key aim is to get them out of the stable and into a more horse-friendly environment. And I know that's really challenging, and it's working with livery yards to look at what have they got, and therefore how can we adapt what they already have to make it a more horse-centred environment. Yeah. Because that is the main problem that people I talk to have, is there just isn't anywhere that meets horses' basic needs for them to keep their horse.
No,
so there's a much bigger issue. Yeah.
But within that, we can still hopefully bring that little bit more choice in the tiny things. You made a really good point there. Multiple places to eat, multiple places to drink. You know, we have this idea that we have one water trough, that we have one hay pile, and that we have one horse eating off it because we don't want to risk putting others together. So, you know, just those little tweaks, and we hope we move the dial a bit so that people see how beneficial it is to their horses. You know, but it's crazy if your horse does have to be stabled for a few hours. giving them different ways to access that same food. We're not saying give them stacks, more food. We're just saying you could maybe offer it in different places in the stable, in different containers. Some of those little changes are relatively easy to make, aren't they?
They are. So if you are stuck in that situation where your horse has to be sold, I know in the UK we're coming into winter now, and everyone starts to get anxious because they're told they've got to lock their horse in. So can we create those 3 Fs as close as possible: friends, forage, freedom? So forage, can we put, if they have to have a set amount of forage, break it into a couple of different nets, put them in different places. By doing that, you have created movement, because the horse has to move from one place to another. When we've got movement, then we've got a healthier horse, mentally, physically. Is there a way that they can be next to their friend that they go out with? Can they be with the same horse as much as possible, as long as it's a horse they feel safe with and it feels safe with them? Is there ways that we can put enrichment in? So can we put little scent trails around the outside of the stable? Can we hide things in hay? Can we put different sounds or different visual stimuli outside of the stable so the horse can withdraw from them, but they're there if they want to interact?
Yeah, brilliant.
Things like water buffets and things like that. So all those things are helpful. If you've got, the ideal, I think, is having some kind of barn space, because the land issue, especially in the UK, is a problem. Land just turns into a quagmire. So if there's some kind of barn space where horses that are comfortable together can be together, and then maybe just a little pathway that goes to another hay feeder, so they wander off over there to eat, and then they wander back to drink. And even that, just little tiny bit, doesn't require a massive amount of space, but makes a huge difference.
Massive. And that, of course, brings in the ability to control their own destiny to a degree. And also some of the things you're saying there, bringing that idea of challenge, because normally we just put a horse in a field, electric fence it, there's nothing in there, as you said, impoverished living conditions for a horse, and there's nothing for them to do. They have no challenge in their life at all, and that is not a normal life for a horse. And then we wonder why they're climbing the walls and they're anxious about everything. So any little things that you can add in, with scent work, finding food, is going to help. It's going to be that little challenge for a horse who isn't naturally challenged. And also, just nothing to do with what you said, but just to add on for listeners, just because you chuck your horse out in a field, if it has no enrichment in it, it's barely better than a stable, to be honest.
No, and that is, I mean, then there is that it's easier to put a big hay ring in the middle than put hay everywhere, and I understand there's a time thing as well.
Constraint.
But every now and then, can we now put other hay around, or can we put a couple of branches in that have fallen off trees, or can we can we do anything like that? And just maybe a couple of times a week create an enrichment. So on our YouTube channel, I'll send you a link to that. There's a whole playlist of enrichment activities that people can do. They're really easy ones, and they can just throw them in, pick a couple a week, throw them in there, and then you're triggering that dopamine response, and you're helping horses start to use their brains to think and reason. So that kind of brings us on to what we looked at with the whole agency thing.
If you can draw us into kind of how agency works, because that absolutely intrigues me. Tie it into the CABI case study where you can, obviously, lovely. But we'd like to hear the kind of stuff behind it in your voice. Is always really interesting to hear. Yeah,
so I started to give them access to bigger and bigger spaces. So we don't own a lot of land. We have about 1.5 acres. But when you open the gate, there is wilderness. So at night they go, and they reappear in the morning. And then a couple of months a year, I've got a friend who has a croft, which is a massive space of open moorland, which goes onto a beach. And so they've had time out there as well. So they've gradually had the opportunity to rewild themselves. And I've started to see behaviours after about a year and a half. I started to see behaviours that I've never seen in horses before, because they were able to. So, for example, in domestic horses. So, for example, I've got a very old lady. She's nearly 30, my little Bonnie, and I've got her daughter and another little boy. And the daughter and the little boy are very active. They like to move a lot. Bonnie not so much. She would rather find the nicest bit of grass and stay there. So I had them all out on the beach, and I was sitting up on a rock. It was like a rocky outcrop, and they were all on one side. And then Pix and Oski decided to walk over the rock to the other side. They're very motivated by movement. Bonnie chose not to. But when it was quite windy, and when they left, she didn't really notice them leave. And then when she did notice, oh yeah, no, it's all right, I'm going to stay here and eat. And they disappeared over, so she couldn't see them anymore. And I sat and watched, and she, after a little while, she started to walk figure of eights around the ground, and she picked up their scent and then followed exactly where they had walked up over the hill to the other side, and just got to a point where she could see them again, and then stopped and carried on eating there. But I've never seen a horse scent track another horse in a domestic context before, because they don't need to.
They're so close, they can just look up. And that is fascinating, because I find that, like with the dogs as well, that they are not used to using their scent, even though we know they're brilliant at it. Kind of switch it off, because they live in our world where there are smells everywhere, and if that's all they did, and you see a lot of people walking dogs and it's all in a hurry, there's no chance to sniff. But once they start sniffing, it like opens their world back up. And why not exactly the same thing for horses? Sorry, that's one of my pet things, is going on about how wonderful scent work is for horses.
For everything. Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a real thing. And since they've been able to do that, they're doing it more and more and more and more.
Wow.
Now, incorporating it into everything. So we did like a little introduction to scent work here with a group that come down. We set the scent trail up. Oscar's an amazing scent tracker. He's my little mini Shetland. He'll be off rescuing people from mountains before you know it. But we had the scent trail set up, and he kept walking away from the scent trail to somebody else in the group. Why are you leaving? I said, I've got a piece of apple in my pocket. And he was just scent trailing her because she had the apple. Yeah. And that's his favourite. There wasn't any apple in his scent bag. But it was a tiny piece in a big thick coat pocket, and she was several metres away from where the scent trail was. Yeah. But he picked it up so quickly, and he wouldn't have done that originally. No. He wouldn't. Their ability to scent track has massively improved, but also their ability to move and negotiate and problem solve. This is where the challenge bit comes in. Because the environment they're in, they have to go over, under, through, across lots of different terrain. They've got to do a lot of problem solving to work out how to move across the terrain. And all of them had come from fields. Some fields were on hills, some of them, but they were fields, so they didn't have to negotiate at all. And especially Bonnie being older, she has a bit of arthritis in her hips. She often looks a bit lame. But since they were out on the hill, I took them out on the hill for a couple of months, she looks amazing, and she can navigate everything. Her proprioception is amazing, her physical fitness, her willingness to move. She's lost, she's like, we went for a walk over the mountain the other day, and she came galloping up the path behind me. I thought, it's been a long time since I've seen you run like that. But happily, she was just enjoying and stopped and had a munch next to us. So the benefits of allowing horses physical challenge within their environment outweigh what we can do through lunging or schooling, or because this is free horse-led movement with a purpose. So you're mixing together a dopamine release, a happy hormone release within the body, being able to problem solve, and then being able to get that free forward movement, and then moving in a way that their body is comfortable with at that time. They're not being pushed into something. Yeah. They're not being chased by anything. So you don't have the stress being released. So that the overall health of movement and physical well-being that you get from providing a challenging terrain, and you can do this by putting logs in fields and little hills, and Lucy Reese has created a lovely little kind of horse platform thing where they come up and over and around it. It's more beneficial to create that than it is build beautiful stables with bars in between, and
100%. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
And you get that you get much healthier, happier, safer horses when you can provide choice, control, and challenge.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I love that. And it makes me think about, you were there at Understand Horses Live, those videos of Sam's, and I know I harped on about it, but those horses they are not getting any conditioning from humans. They are just going up and down rocky tracks to get to water, to get to grazing, and to be together. And their bodies are amazing. And somebody did say at some point during the day, yes, but I bet they don't live to be very old. And of course, I didn't have any data on me, but I spoke to Sam later and she said, that's not actually true. They don't, I mean, obviously things happen and they can't intervene. They don't intervene. And so horses do, sadly meet their end in different ways than we might in captivity in our domestic horses. But they do still live pretty long lives. And just to see muscles that look and work, it's fantastic. And you talking about your old girl and how, that's really helped her. And I know the older I get, the more I have to move. Sitting still is much harder, isn't it? You need to be able to use your body in a good way. So I love all that. And again, I know people will say, but I can't do that. The more, you've just talked about there having a platform. The more you can bring, the more interest you can bring into your horse's life. And they just love standing on platforms and high spots and looking around. It always makes me laugh. If you put one in a field, they're like all on it. They love it.
That's it. And if you have so we have so when the weather's really bad, I'm in a rainforest. So there are certain times when they cannot walk across the ground because they would just sink into the peat bog. So I have 2 little pathways that go to different zones, and then they've got the barn. So when it's really bad, they're restricted to the pathways in the barn. And one of the enrichments I do is get piles of branches and hide food, little pieces of food in and around them, big piles of branches. So they step into the branches. And then they have to move their bodies around the branches, out of them. They're touching them on the belly, they're touching them on the back, they're touching them around the legs. And it's a pile of branches. It's not a big deal to stick that out in the middle of the field. And you add in different branches and they'll munch on those, but they'll dig around or they'll paw them, and all of that is physical movement in lots of different ways. And I think that's the key difference when we're looking at agency within their living environment, is that sometimes we do kind of platforms and things in our training, and we'll set up a nice little agility thing, and that's really lovely as well. But having those options that they can choose to engage with as and when, or choose not to as well.
Still maybe choice, isn't it? When you say to people, give them a water buffet or give them different options of soaked haze or things, and people are always like, well, they didn't like it. But they still got to choose not to have it. And I think it's a really important difference that people don't think about. You can say, I don't want that today, but still keep trying different stuff. It never hurts. But I'd like to bring us back round now to horseplay, how you give agency kind of within your business, because we don't want to shut down equine businesses. We want equine businesses to understand they can still run a business within this much better situation for the horses that are in there within reason. Certainly a business like yours, which sounds fantastic. So tell us how does it happen? How do people turn up? And I know you said that you used to have people who were just tourists, but I think it's gone beyond that now, and you have quite a lot of horsey people interested, don't you?
Yeah, so I still run the tourist things, and largely that's a lot of families, and that's great because I want to brainwash children into recognizing.
I love it.
But I also have, so we've got our first ever retreat. I feel like I'm marketing a bit, but we've got our first ever retreat in May next year, and it's a 4-day retreat here. So people from whatever horse background, whether professionals or owners or just horse enthusiasts, they can come and experience going out for adventures with horses completely loose, and we'll have lots of discussion around agency and how you build it into a domestic context and whatever their context is. So it's now, going to the Understand Horse thing really brought it home to me that people don't see this very often. They don't get to experience a horse choosing them, or a horse they've never met choosing them within half an hour. That's not something that is often an option. How do you set that up? Where do you... So that's really what the retreat is all about. Just come and experience it. This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. So the way it works here, I wanted to keep teaching horse behaviour, but I didn't want to compromise the welfare of the horses at the same time. So whenever you have a business where the horses need to do something in order to make money, there's a compromise going to happen. So I had to look very carefully at how do I make sure both sides are benefiting. And I was quite nervous about it first of all. So I just like distracted by a pony walking off into a forest. Quite nervous first of all because I thought, well, are people going to be, they're going to want to come if they can't ride because they're Shetland ponies. But also when I had the big horses, we didn't ride them either. But are they going to want to come if they can't ride? And are they going to want to come if I'm not going to give them a rope to lead the pony with? You know, people come with a certain expectation.
Yeah.
But actually what I've found is there's a lot of tears partway through because people suddenly have an incredible emotional connection when the horse chooses them.
Yeah.
And that's something they've never experienced before. And it's an overwhelming, anyone who's had that feeling of, you know, heart connection that you get with a horse,
yeah.
it's really quite emotional. But the way we got to that point, the agency thing has to happen first. So you can't, in a commercial context, it's not safe to allow total agency if a horse is unwell because their behaviour is influenced by how they feel. If a horse feels unsafe, so if they've got high cortisol levels, or if they don't feel safe in the environment, if they feel stressed, and usually they feel stressed because they don't have enough control over the environment or something's happening to impact on that control. Just like with humans, you know, if you take control away from humans, then you see more depression, you see more anxiety, you see more stress, more helplessness, more unhealthy behaviours, more stereotypical behaviours. Same things happen to horses. So getting the agency right in the living environment first is number one. You can't do the rest without that. So that has to be in place. So once the ponies had settled and once I knew that they were able to be happy themselves, you know, everything chemically their bodies were nice and balanced and, you know, they're interacting, they were problem solving, they're really thinking. Then what we started to do was look at the other concepts around how agency how horse-human relationships improves. One is a predictability. So when the horses can predict what's going to happen, they feel safer, they're more likely to want to be involved. As long as the thing that's going to happen isn't horrible. As long as it's a nice thing that's going to happen. So I always follow the same structure of the session. So we start off, and when families come or when people come, we have a chat and we stand outside. So the ponies normally, they bring themselves into the barn whenever they hear a car coming up, like, yes, what's happening now? So they all come and pile into the barn, and we stand on the other side of the fence to the barn and we chat. And I talk people through who the ponies are, what their history is, where they've come from. And we then play a little game. Like, do you know as kids, do you play What's the Time, Mr.
Yeah.
So I created a game that's similar to that, but rather than a wolf, they're the horse, and then the people are people. So we talk through a few common communication signals, facial expressions, body movements, and the people can only come closer when the horse gives the communication signal that it's okay, or stops the communication signal that says not okay. So we really highlight, this is a distance increasing behaviour. Your horse is saying step back.
Yeah.
So they learn that. And because it's a bit silly, and we're going to do it with adults and kids, in fact, you know, everyone feels a little bit silly, but everyone laughs and relaxes.
Yeah.
And the reason we do that right next to where the horses are is because this idea of synchronicity. So when they're within 2 meters, the horses are going to sync with the human's heart rate, and they're going to pick up on the energy levels. Well, if they've got people coming in that are nervous or anxious, they then become nervous and anxious, and their behaviour becomes, I say less predictable, it becomes very predictable. You're not going to be more reactive. You can have a more reactive horse if you've got a reactive person. So by playing a game, first of all, getting everyone calm, everyone relaxed, one, they're learning about what they've got to look out for. 2, their heart rates drop and they're much more relaxed, and therefore the horse is much more relaxed. But also they start to see the horses as, this is a sentient being that is communicating with you. This is not a tool for your enjoyment. So it immediately shifts the expectation of the session.
Yeah.
And then I go in and I put head colours on when the pony that comes to me wants the head colour on. So they're very particular about who I put head colour on first, and they have their order. And so we do that, and we talk about that at the same time. And while we're doing that, The guests are telling me what communication signals they're seeing, how different horses are feeling. Why is that horse over there? What are they feeling? What are they thinking? Is it to do with us? Is it to do with the other horses? Is it just something to do with them? So we had those conversations, and this happens in 10 minutes at the beginning of the session. It's not a long thing. It's really quick. So then the only other rules I give are we've got, depending on where we are, usually there's a little bit where they've got to go on their ropes. If we're not on the hill and the beach, they have to go up a little road bit to get into the forest. So the rule is we don't pull on the rope unless we have to pull. If it's dangerous or there's a reason we need to move, then we'll pull. Other than that, if they're walking with us, the rope is literally there so that they're not wandering up a road on their own, although that happens occasionally as well. Just wander up there. And then once they're in the safe place away from roads, we take them off and the ponies go at their own pace. And on the beach, it's really lovely because there is no limit. So there's no fence, there's no limit to where they can go, and we go with them at their pace. So some days they want to just graze, and we'll just sit, and I have a backpack full of games and horse behaviour related tasks and things and card games and things, and we'll sit and play with those tasks while the ponies are eating, so it gives the ponies a chance to do that. Especially if it's been a really high tide, they seek out the mineral rich, nutrition rich parts of the beach and the vegetation. So we let them do it, and we say, right, okay, they're doing this at the moment, we're going to leave them to do that for a bit, we're going to play this game, we're going to do this, and then when they say okay, let's go, we start walking again. Other days they just want to go, so it's a really fast walk. We'll get to the other end and we'll play games at the other end when they've got back to the
Doesn't matter,
So they choose. But those walks have been really lovely because the rule is don't go up to your horse unless your horse comes up to you.
Yeah.
Usually we stop partway around, usually about half an hour in, and we give the horses the opportunity to connect with a person. And there's these bids for connection, and they'll go to whichever person they want. And usually it's not me. Usually they go and choose someone else to have a bit of enrichment with. And we'll talk about that pony is asking you to touch because they're nudging, they're physically touching. So whatever they do, you match that behaviour. If they come close and stop here, they're not asking for touch, but they're asking you to breathe with them and just be still and relax and breathe with them. And that's the connection that they want. So we build that in, and that's where you get this profound shift in people, where they'll just be sitting there and there'll be a pony just breathing against their cheek. And often ponies will often fall asleep at that point.
Yeah.
Which is really nice, especially Bonnie. She's like, banana nap time, we'll have a little nap. But that's actually become quite conditioned now as well. We get to certain places and they go, yeah, okay, this is our sleep space. I've never trained it. It's just that, that's what naturally happened. I followed them and okay, we'll keep doing that then.
Yeah, it is training, Nicky. They've trained you that's where they like to have a sleep, and that's what I think is so lovely. When we listen to horses, it isn't just about us training them ever. It's nearly always the other way round. It's nearly always that the human needs the skill, not the horse. So I think it's fascinating that they have got their structure. They know how it works. They know they're allowed to say yes where they want to go. It's wonderful. No wonder people enjoy it, and you get people really getting the feels about it. I can understand that. Yeah,
it's beautiful because we're in such an amazing environment as well. We have seagull, we have the otters. It's nice to sit and be still, and people going back to the effect of the person on the horse.
Yeah,
people are calmer. Yeah, and their horses are calmer, and I think that's a really important part of when we're looking at having horses in a commercial context and with our own horses generally. What is the horse bringing to the session, but what is the person bringing to the session?
Yeah.
And how are you going to adapt to the context or alter the context in some way to make sure that everyone now gets back to that baseline before we go anywhere else. And every day you reassess. If I have a group coming and I know the horses are going to be at high elevation, so the other day we had some really severe storms and all the power, major storms. For a couple of days afterwards, the horses were really high energy, but also all the paths that we went on had trees down across them, so we had to go under trees and over, and they had to do a lot of exploring. So the whole environment had changed, which increases as a prey animal. It's going to increase their alert element. So we had to build that into the sessions, and I had to talk to people about, they're feeling this at the moment. Let's do this, and then we're going to do this, and then that's something I want you to make sure you stay away from this pony. When you see this pony, I want you to stay 2 meters away. I don't want you to go into their space because they're feeling, and it was all built into the conversation.
Yeah, love it.
Originally, I would have been a bit anxious about doing that, thinking, but their people are going to want to go and do this.
Yeah, people expect things, and it's hard for us to turn off from expectation. And I think that is such a lovely thing for people to appreciate, that there is not always a goal. Well, the goal is the whole thing, the whole day is the thing. There's a couple of things that instantly I kind of felt very much that people in the mainstream need to think about there, and what that was the importance you placed on everything being good in their natural living environment before they come to get involved with any member of the public. And we say that constantly, but it still seems to be a struggle for people to understand. When we go on behaviour consults, it's so often that if you make tweaks, even not massive changes always, but if you can tweak the environment, the way the horse is living their life, adding a friend, or just those little things, there's no training. It's literally just making their life more fulfilling. And the other thing that I just jotted down in that last bit that you were talking about, every day is different. You cannot assume that because one day your horse goes into the arena fine or goes out on a hack fine, that on Tuesday it doesn't want to. Oh, but it knows. No, you need to know that something has changed. And I think those things seem very particular to how you look after your little herd of ponies, but actually they're really important for everyone. So if people say, but that's all right for Nicky, she can do that, she can open her gate and let them out on the Highlands, I can't do that. But you can do things around those things, you can understand better, I'm really grateful to you for bringing those things out in that conversation. It's really lovely. We're getting short on time now, and I would love to know, is there something we've missed that you really would like everyone to know? And then finally, to sort of round off with, if somebody wants to become Nicky Ross in their future, where would you had quite an eclectic start, you pick things from here and there, but do you see nowadays there is more of a structured way to, a path to getting to where you are currently today, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's easier to study equine or animal behaviour now. There are actual courses around that, excuse me, that you can take that path much more easily. And I think if it's horse in particular and it's behaviour in particular, be very careful about what course you're looking at, because not all courses that say they include horse behaviour on the syllabus include horse behaviour on the syllabus, if you know what I mean. Are they talking about ethology?
Yeah.
Or are they talking about dominant horses and lead horses and how to really understand the terminology? And take time to watch and see what's going on. And one of the things we're going to talk about a lot in May when we have the retreat up here is, how has our mindset been shaped by what we've been fed or told? How much of that is actually what we're seeing and how much is what we're interpreting? Because there's all the media and all the artwork and all the stories, and it all feeds into our collective consciousness around horses, and it's created this idea of this is what a horse is. But when we sit and watch our horses and get rid of that bit and actually listen to them, what are they actually saying? It opens up another door as well, and it makes you really challenge what you have been told is the case.
Yeah, and maybe even if you think what we knew 20 years ago is already changing. By the time I'm retiring soon, I hope, and later, eventually when people who are younger than me are retiring, we are not going to know the stuff that comes, because there's going to be stuff that comes out, more and more of it, and it's down to people like you for looking at those things. And so to kind of really knock on the door of that information and say, look, I'm going to open that and see, is that real? Like you were saying about picking a course that really teaches behaviour, not the lead horse and the lead mare and all the stuff that we know now is not right. But we thought it was right for a long time.
Yeah. And when I first did my qualifications, it was
right. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lead mare. It wasn't a dominant mare. It was a magnanimity led thing, passed down from mother to daughter. That was what the thinking was, and we know now that that's not, because we haven't found evidence to back that up. So yeah, like you say, it's changing all the time, and that's why I changed from a set course. I changed it to a study group because we now need to make sure that we're always updating.
Yeah, keeping it open all the time.
And it's amazing the work that's being done now in terms of affiliative behaviours and horse communication and agency, all the work that's now been done in agency and horses. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
And it can only lead to a much clearer evolution and revolution in the horse-human relationship and the way that we interact with horses, and just move away from this equine welfare crisis and start to see imagine what is the next step. What is it going to look like? How do we work with the horses without restraint? Or with these guys now, with the agency, Pixie's had to undergo some quite intensive sarcoid treatment, which has been on her udder, so really uncomfortable. She's not a big fan of touch. But because we've done it completely through agency, she knows the structure of what's going to happen. She understands the equipment that I'm using. She has a cue for, start. And you can say, I need a minute. And I never put a head collar on. There's no restraint. I sit on my log, say, I've got my stuff. I'm on my log. You come to me when you're ready. And she comes over. She has a scratch. We do the thing. She takes a step back. I wait. She steps forward. We carry on.
Yeah.
And then we had the dentist come out the other day. And I hate having the equine dentist. I hate it. And last time she was done a few years ago, she was up in the air. It was just horrific. But this time, I talked him through and I said, okay, that's her cue for stop. And so he stopped. And then she came back in and he did the whole thing without restraint.
Yeah.
And she had to have the gag on because she had to get right to the back, but we didn't hold her.
Yeah.
No, she was just on with us, with her friends.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm ready or I'm not. And that was uncomfortable for her. It was painful for her. But because she was given control and she could go if she needed to go, she could handle it. She could deal with it.
I don't think people understand how powerful listening to them is, to build those little, we're talking about observing things, but you can then use those observations as really clear signals to start or stop. And when they know that you're going to honour the stop, they're like, okay, well, we can start because I know when I struggle, you're going to let me stop. So, I love that. It's just brilliant that you're doing all that stuff, Nicky. It makes such a difference to,
it's
not just to your hair, but
we can pan it out to everybody. We're running CPD for other equine professionals so they can build it into their own work. I was working with Bristol Veterinary School as well, how we can integrate it into their training for their students.
Yeah.
And then they're now creating programs across all species based on this. And there's a really good it's called Providing Evidence-Based and Behaviour-Friendly Equine Visits 2021, Lonnie Loftus and Hannah Donovan. Yeah. And it's a really easy, straightforward traffic light system. If you see this, stop. If you see this, slow down. If you see this, you're good to go. And it's just really, if all equine professionals that are going to do stuff with, like medical stuff with horses or owners,
add that, it would be great.
It's a great beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and Hannah's been on the podcast, so if anyone wants to listen back to previous ones, so I think it's all brilliant. Just a heads up for people, I have got a cooperative care webinar coming up with Understand Horses in beginning of December. So there's loads of stuff out there now which there wasn't, and this is just amazing that we've got that much there. We will share your everything, your website, your social media. I've got all the links for that, and people can find you, and I assume that you're quite good about being approached in those ways. What would be the best way for anyone to contact you, Nicky, if they wanted to speak to you directly?
So actually through Facebook Messenger.
Yeah,
a lot of people contact me that way, but the email address is there as well. I can be contacted by email. Cool. Yeah, and if anybody wants to come here in May, they're very welcome.
Give her a shout. Yeah, it sounds amazing.
Go for them.
Brilliant. That sounds amazing, Nikki. Thank you so much. I think we could talk for hours and hours, but hopefully we've given people a taste of what is going on with horseplay and all the things that are Nikki. So fantastic. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Trudy. Thanks for inviting me.
Nikki's work challenges us to reimagine what partnership with horses can look like when we truly listen to their voices. I'm so excited to dive into this conversation. Hi, Nikki. Welcome to the podcast.